Hey friends, welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas.
And I'm Melissa Trevathan.
And we're so glad you joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in.
Sandra Stanley received her Bachelor of Science degree from Georgia Tech and Master of Arts from Dallas Theological Seminary. Sandra has a heart for foster kids and foster families, as she and Andy have been foster parents since 2010. Her ministry passion is promoting foster care in the local church. Much of her time these days is spent working on various writing projects and continuing her involvement with Fostering Together, the foster care initiative at North Point Ministries. Allie Cooney graduated from Auburn University with a degree in communication. She completed the North Point residency program and simultaneously earned a Master's of Christian Education degree from Dallas Theological Seminary. She has a heart for middle school and high school students and can often be spotted at any number of local coffee shops, pouring into girls in those seasons of life. We are thrilled to have our first mother-daughter duo on the podcast today.
Well, we are so excited to have you back, Sandra, and to get to meet you, Allie.
Hi.
This is so much fun to have this time
so nice
with you
to meet
all.
y'all.
Oh my goodness.
Thank
Well, like
you so
everyone else
much.
on the planet, we love your parents and we have heard the most amazing things about you. And so it's so
Well,
fun to have
thank
this
you.
point of connection today. But just start out by telling us a little bit about you and your families, both of you.
Okay. Well, so I am married to Andy. We've been married 36 years yesterday. Day before yesterday.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So Andy and I have 3 kids. Andrew is 32. He's married to Anna. Garrett is 30. He's married to Danielle and has our 6-month-old little granddaughter.
Oh,
And then
congratulations.
Allie is our youngest. She's 28 and married to Clay. And she has our almost 2-year-old granddaughter,
Yep.
who Andy is now babysitting. So,
Oh, that's so
So if you hear
fun.
While we
screams
did
and
it.
crashes, don't even.
yeah, he's
Don't
Papa
worry.
now. His favorite
Oh,
role is Papa. these days,
And what's your
so.
name, Sandra? What's your grandmother name?
I'm Dida. There's a whole story there. I had a niece who couldn't say Sandra, and it came out Dida. And I thought, oh, this is going to be so fun. I'm going to be a grandmother. I get to choose my name, my grandma name.
Yeah.
And my niece looked at me and she goes, you have a name? So
It's true.
Had to stick
Yeah,
with
she
it,
was
huh?
throwing out stuff, and we
I
were like,
know.
okay,
I was trying out all
Dida.
kind of things. And she's like,
Oh.
yeah, no. So
No.
Dida.
So I'm
That's
Dida,
pretty cute,
which-
though.
It is.
That's
You
very
know,
endearing.
the hard consonant is so easy for them to say.
true.
Yes.
And so she was saying my
Definitely
name
says
early.
it. She said it, I think,
Yes.
before she said mama.
Yeah.
Mama
Oh.
like
like the hard
very
consonant
hard
thing.
for her. Yeah, but my name's Allie, and I've been in student ministry pretty much my whole life since I was a student. When I was in high school, I was leading middle school girls. And when I was college, I was leading high school and middle school girls, and then worked officially in student ministry for about 5 years, 3 with middle, 2 with high school.
Wow.
Have my degree from DTS for biblical education, and then married Clay, my husband, in 2020, and had a little baby girl in 2022, and just loving it. Just loving being
Aw.
a mama.
That's so sweet. You
so
have lived in
fun.
the girl world for a lot of years.
Yeah. Well, I really have 2 brothers, and then my husband only has brothers. So when we had a
Wow.
little girl, everyone was like, what do we do? But
Aw.
it's so great.
His mom is
Yes.
loving it too,
Yeah.
because this is her first girl. So that's been
Oh, that's
fun.
so fun.
Yeah.
Really.
That's so fun.
So fun.
Well, y'all really are our first ever mother-daughter combo, which is so
we
fun
love
for
that.
us. I
So
know. So, of course, that means we have lots of questions about the book, about y'all's relationship, all the things. But we're so excited about this book, Meet Me in the Middle. We have lots of things we want to ask you about that. But we'd love to start off talking a little bit about your relationship. I mean, obviously, working with girls all these years, I believe the mother-daughter relationship is one that brings so much joy
Mhm.
in the long run. And in the meantime, as girls are growing up, and Allie, you, I'm sure, have coached a lot of girls through this too. It can be really tough.
Yeah.
So, would love to hear y'all both talk about what the hardest season. We're just jumping in. Here's what you get with two
Going
therapists.
to the deep end. Let's go to the deep end first.
What was the toughest season of your relationship, and what do you wish you had known or done differently during that?
That I think. Well, one of the things about us is Allie and I are wired completely differently, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more in a little while.
Different.
But it's really funny. She has her dad's whole package of giftedness, which is awesome, and it's amazing, and it's been so fun to do this project with her because of that. But we are so different, and I wish that I wish I had understood a little earlier in our mother-daughter journey that my goal was not to make Allie a mini me, because that just kind of seems to be what's intuitive, I think, for a lot of moms, and we make assumptions. And I think she and I have had a strong relationship throughout all of the journey, but probably for me, the high school years were when I really rocked giving unsolicited advice. And
I was like, what are you about to say?
And I mean, and not in the ways that she needed it the most. And so I had to learn through a process during those years that while yes, there are things that I need to communicate, I need to take a step back and every single time consider my approach, because we aren't wired the same. Yeah. And so I did not always take the right approach. And so I think probably my biggest parenting regret with her was not understanding that sooner. Because when she was, when they're little, you don't see the differences as quickly. But when they get to be, middle school, high school, we have to adjust our approach and we have to be students of our daughters. And I didn't do that. I wish I had done that sooner. So I think for me, that was probably maybe my trickiest little season in my own heart and mind with Allie, was navigating and figuring that out.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And then I would say I actually have a different answer. I think my college years, because I went to Auburn, I moved states, and I think just that separation and me really trying to figure out my own self apart from my family, I think that maybe I separated myself a little bit more than I necessarily needed to. And I would go off to camp for summers and just like not have my phone and not really think about how that was affecting my family.
Meanwhile, I'm holding my phone going, why is she answering?
Right. And so kind of looking back, and also in colleges, I kind of started struggling a little bit more with mental health and anxiety, and kind of believing this false narrative that they are not going to understand. And so that's not really a place I can go to. And so I think that just created more disconnection than honestly necessary. It was kind of all just a narrative in my own head. And I looking back, I think, I was a college student, and so I'm so focused on like figuring myself out that they're back home loving me, and I'm just kind of doing my own thing. And so I think I wish I could go back and tell myself like, hey, don't totally disconnect. Like, go back. Like, they want to be here for you in this. They want to be connected to you in this. And so I think I just I think that was,
and it's so important to individuate. And so, giving her some space to do that was important. Yeah. And especially with a dad who everybody knows, and, you need to figure out who she is.
I wanted to go into ministry, but I'm like, wait, how do I do that with the dad? It was just a lot to figure out. And so I think
how do I get to be me?
Yeah, I pulled away a little bit more than I needed to.
Well, I was just thinking, my hope would be that moms and daughters would listen to this together. But I think based on what you just said, every mom has pulled over the car, rewinded to the beginning of you talking, and cannot wait for their daughters to listen to that. My parents were just at home loving me. And that's so good.
Well, it's because now I have a little baby girl, and I've said this a couple times, but the moment I had her was so emotional for me because, postpartum in general. But then looking at my mom and being like, oh no, do you love me this much? Like, no way. Like,
Allie,
no way.
Beautiful.
You love me as much as I love this baby girl. And so just becoming a mom has totally wrecked my view of just like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
I'm
so
that's
sorry.
so
was
good.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, Allie, because I don't know if your mom told you
Mhm.
that one of the things that your mom and dad and the two of us have in common is we're all Enneagram 1s.
That's right.
Perfect.
Yes.
That's right.
So is my husband.
No
which is
way.
like, what did I do? Why?
I
You are
know.
surrounded by them.
Surrounded.
Yes. And she's so artsy and creative and just, it's so beautiful
I
the way
think
God has made her.
one is
And
my
it's different.
lowest.
Yeah.
Because I
What-
took one of those tests that tell you where they
Yes.
and I'm like, one is like bottom. So I
What
don't
are
need it.
you?
They're surrounded. I'm a 3. I'm
You're
a
a
3 wing
3.
too.
Okay.
And just,
Yeah.
That's
flying
interesting.
by the seat of my pants.
Well, and to that first question of, regrets and, the hard season, being a 1 and being, an engineer and wanting everything to be perfectly lined up and solved for X and formulas and all the things. And her being an artist, I mean, just being a 3 and having big feelings and all of that. I don't have big feelings usually. And so all of that kind of played into that little stew of, potential problems.
Right.
And so working through all that was
And as a 3,
important.
really caring about what other people think of me and really caring about what my parents think of me.
Sure.
And kind of going off and, figuring it out on my own. I think I just, you care too much. 3s care too much about people's views. So this is great. Thank you for asking that question. We're like,
We're actually at therapy. I just didn't tell
I know. I love therapy. That's another one thing about me. I love therapy.
Oh, y'all.
You
so
too.
good.
You're so fun. Well, we'd love to ask to talk about what inspired the book and even what was it like writing together?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, contrary to all the things we've just said, most of our mother-daughter journey has been so much fun and has been so wonderful. And both having done so many years in student ministry, we have just felt like, gosh, we've seen so much. And one of the things that we know to be true from our own experience and from seeing other people is that if we can get moms and daughters talking about some of these potential hot topics before, while the temperature is low, the drama is low, have some conversations around some of these topics, then when the temperature goes up, those conversations have happened and a foundation has been laid and there's just a lot of work that's already been done. And so part of our motivation for writing the book was to give moms and daughters an opportunity to talk about these 8 topics, a little bit of spiritual spiritual formation, and then these 7 other topics. And so that was really important to us on the front end.
Yeah. And then being in student ministry for so long, I noticed this pattern of we would get these students on Sunday and we would tell them who they are in Christ and we would tell them about wisdom and all the things. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday happened and they would come back and it's like, you don't remember it? Nothing was reinforced. It's kind of starting over at the bottom again. And so creating a resource that equips parents to continue on these conversations that they're having in youth group or even continue on enforcing you're so valuable in Christ. God loves you. And just even having spiritual conversations throughout the week, I think just sets up a student. They come back and it's totally different. They're ready to grow even more. And so creating
something that equips.
Right, a resource that really helps those conversations continue on, I feel like was a big part of mine.
Giving moms or mentors or grandmothers or aunts or whoever might be pouring into these young ladies, giving them some tools where they feel confident about helping their daughter along in their spiritual journey and in their Jesus following, which then informs these other things like stress and comparison and all other things that come along in discussions. It's just we thought would be a powerful thing.
It's so good. So the subtitle is 8 Mother-Daughter Conversations About Life and Faith. We all start off with just an overview of the conversations and why you picked these 8.
Yeah. We went back and forth a lot trying to figure out this 8. And some we were going to combine and some we separated. And so we do foundations, which is just like a gospel presentation because that is what all of these practical things are built off of.
Yes.
So the first is identity. We really want these girls to know who they are and how they can live that out. That's a huge passion of mine, talking about identity, because I really feel like most problems end up being an identity problem. So really rooting and establishing these girls' identities. Comparison, which goes right along with identity, but needs its own thing.
Yes, it does.
Because we talk about how comparison says look to the left and the right. Culture says to look at yourself, but God says to fix your eyes on Jesus. So that's kind of our main thing of, hey, if you focus on Jesus, and we get more practical than that, but that's the basic. And then family relationships, that's one of my favorite chapters. Talking about how family's forever, and how friendships will come and go, but how can we really love our family really well? And then relationships with others,
friends and boys and all of that, and how to be wise in who they choose to spend their time with, and wise about who they choose to date when that time comes. We talk about fears. We've got a whole chapter on fears. We want our girls to know that fear does not have to be the boss of them, which you always talk about so beautifully. And then we talk about stress and pressure, which, no
one's ever felt.
Yeah.
So that's
maybe that's just us.
Skip that chapter. Not applicable to anyone.
Yeah. But, the reality is our girls are carrying a lot, so much more than they ever have before. And so in the midst of those unavoidable stresses and pressures, we want them to know where they can find that peace. And there's really just one place, and how moms can point them back to that. And then our last chapter is about decision making. Because we want our girls to know they're writing the story of their life, one decision at a time. We want them to learn how to make the good decisions, carry as few regrets as possible through those middle school years and high school years. So those are the topics that we address. And again, with a foundation of faith underneath, because we want their faith to be what informs all of those other topics in the way that they live those things out.
Amen.
You all,
Thank y'all.
What a good and needed resource from two trustworthy voices. I'm just so thankful. It's so fun to hear you all talk more about it. Okay, we all know that it can be hard to connect with adolescent girls, and tweens may be a smidge easier, but what encouragement or advice would you give to parents who want to get their daughters talking more and want to strengthen the relationship?
I think once again, it is so important to be a student of your daughter and to have some clarity around how she's wired and, her temperament, her personality, her preferences. What are her best times to talk? That's one of the big ones, is to understand. Each of my 3 kids were completely different. And we may have talked about this from the parenting book, but they were all so different. There was one way that if I needed to have a conversation with Andrew about something, I knew the environment that was best for having a conversation with him. With Garrett, it was as long as I'd scratch his back, he would tell me everything. I could just get him. I mean, he would just talk as long as I would scratch. I was willing to get a hand cramp, over it. And then with Allie was different than them. And when she walked in from wherever she had been, especially when she went to school, middle school, high school, she would walk in the door and she would regurgitate her whole day with, "Mom, you are not going to believe blah, 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 blah." But if I missed that moment, if I wasn't there for that moment, then I missed it. Because once she got up to her room and go in with her homework or whatever it is she was going to do next, the moment was lost. So, just being a student and understanding, what is the environment where they're most set up to communicate, and then majoring on that. And understanding how they're made is, I think, a huge, huge, huge piece of that for parents.
And I think a big thing is talking about kind of what they want to talk about. And so when we were writing this, I was very much under the impression that getting moms to want to read this, I think, will be pretty easy.
Yes.
But getting these girls to want to read it might be a little bit more difficult. And so really focusing on the felt needs of these girls, that no girl is going to be like, "Nope, I've never felt stressed. Nope, I've never compared myself to anyone. I don't want to talk about it." It's no, these are conversations that I think they'll want to have because they're conversations that they're probably having with their friends. And so I think it'll be easy to kind of use that of, hey, these are things you're going through. Let's talk about them. Like, I'm not mad at you. We're not talking about you because you've done them wrong. We're getting on the front side of them to have conversations really before anything goes wrong.
Yeah. And doing this project with Allie was so fun because she is a little closer to their age and she could be in their heads better than I could. And so it was really fun. We would hand our chapters back and forth to each other as we wrote them. And she would say, Mom, no, you can't say it like that. And I'm like, well, I'm talking to the mom. She said, it doesn't matter.
Language has changed.
That word doesn't mean what you thought, what it used to mean, Mom.
Yeah, it means that's not what that means.
So the other thing, and you had asked about what the writing process was like. The other thing is we are wired so completely differently. So the whole thing was almost comical.
Yeah.
Because for me, one chapter took 2 weeks or more.
But it was perfect. There
Allie,
was no
because she could write the corresponding chapter in 2 hours. 2 hours.
But there were flaws. There was spelling errors, and I don't remember how to use a semicolon. So.
It was so funny. We really did laugh a lot.
Oh, y'all. That's so fun to hear about. Well, I love that you have a section on comparison because I certainly talk to a lot of girls in my office who are struggling with that. And I think I'd be curious what y'all would say to this, but it feels to me like in this age of social media, moms are struggling more than I've ever known them to struggle with it too. And
yes.
And y'all give great practical tools throughout the book. What encouragement would you give to moms in helping their girls with comparison, but also helping themselves?
Yeah. Yes. Comparison is no respecter of ages. I mean, what we
don't graduate.
You don't. What we compare might change, but the tendency to look around and compare, it just really never does. No matter what, no matter how many verses we know, no matter how spiritual we are, it just is a human tendency. And so that sets us up for some hard stuff. So the 2 practical things that we talk about in the book is celebrate what God has given others and leverage what God has given you. Celebrate what God has given others, leverage what God has given you. And what we've learned and what you've seen and what we've all seen as we've, tried to do this is celebrating other people shrinks jealousy's power over us. It just shrinks it. And it's not necessarily intuitive. It takes a little work to come up with ways to celebrate other people. But it just is a powerful, powerful tool to reduce jealousy and envy and all of the yucky stuff that seems to come up when we compare. It's just amazing what happens in our hearts when we celebrate somebody else. So we talk a lot to the moms and girls about figuring out very real ways that they can celebrate a friend. So if the daughter has a friend who just made cheerleading and she didn't make it, those are hard things in their real life. And so, how can we celebrate her? I mean, we're not going to pretend, but at the same time, how can we celebrate? So maybe we go together to the grocery store and buy a card and go deliver it and, give her a hug. That's celebrating. And even if it doesn't feel like the thing we want to do, it still does an extraordinary work in our hearts. And for moms to model this and to be honest with their girls about when they struggle is so powerful. So somebody gets a promotion at work and mom goes to her daughter and says, hey, remember how we've been talking about comparison? I'm kind of feeling that yucky thing because she got the promotion that I really wanted. How about, would you go with me to pick up something and deliver to her house? Or here's the text I'm thinking about sending her. So let your daughter be in it with you and see that you're not perfect as a mom either. And here's what it looks like in my season of life. And let's just do this together on an ongoing basis through all your years of middle school and high school, knowing that we both struggle with it. So I just think that's a powerful thing.
So good.
Oh, and then the second thing, that's just the celebrating. And then leverage what God has given you. Yeah, leveraging what God has given you. So do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, well, I think when you're comparing, you either, come up short or come up superior. And I think a lot of times when it's like, oh, you came up superior, you're good, we don't even need to talk about it. But that breeds pride. And that also is not good for your relationships at all. So leveraging what God has given you, it's saying, hey, I actually am gifted in this way. And that's something that I can be so grateful to God for. But how can I actually elevate other people instead of pushing them down to make myself feel better? How can I take my gift? I give the example of you do better on a test than a friend. How can next time you help your friend study? So you pull them up instead of kind of pushing them down, which is what comparison says to do. It's like push people down so you're on top. And so kind of flipping that of, hey, you are gifted by God and that is wonderful and amazing, but it's a gift from God that you can use and leverage to help other people.
Yeah. So good.
Yes. A verse that undergirds this book is one that we love too, Philippians 4:4-9. Will you all talk about that verse, just the importance of that verse in general, but in particular for moms and daughters?
Mm-hmm. So in our identity chapter, we talk about keeping the truth in front of you. But then the second point in that chapter is to live out your identity. And what I love about Philippians 4 is it's so practical living out your identity. It's do not be anxious. It's set your eyes on what is lovely and righteous and all of those things. It's rejoicing when you don't want to. It's being gentle. These are actual practical ways that Paul is giving his readers to live out who they are. And so throughout the whole chapters, we kind of take little pieces and put it in. Like for the fear chapter, we really dwell on, hey, God is near. And for the stress chapter, it's the do not be anxious about anything. And so we kind of pick it apart and place it in different chapters. And it's kind of the theme throughout all the chapters because it's truly really good examples of how you actually live out who God created you to be.
That's right. And it was a verse that was so meaningful in our journey together. And the part about, whatever's true, whatever's honorable, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely. And Allie and I, for whatever reason, grabbed hold of the word lovely when she was growing up. And we would contextualize some of her decision making and some of my decision making as it relates to what would be lovely. Like, as with clothing choices, with activity choices, with entertainment choices, what's the lovely thing to do? What's the right, what's true and honorable and right and pure and what's lovely? And I don't know, there was just something that brought some clarity to some decision making for us. And so that was just kind of a special verse in our own journey. And we thought, wow, let's see if we can leverage this for some other
We wanted to figure out how to make this book titled Lovely.
We
but
did.
it didn't really make any sense.
I know.
But that really, that's kind of the word that my mom helped me filter life through. Like, was that a lovely thing to say? Like, no, and like, is that a lovely outfit? Like, probably not, So it's vague, but it's not, it means something really specific, but it can be. So that was really a big part of my childhood.
Yeah.
What a beautiful thing that God would then have the two of you write a book together, that it would be the verse that undergirds this book. That is so neat and rich. And
that was all part of that brainstorming process in the beginning of what do we want this to look like? And and we thought, what about Philippians 4? That was so powerful for us. So
I love that, y'all.
Me too.
Well, this next question is kind of a two-part question. We would love to hear, one, what you feel like kids need most from parents today, what girls need most from moms specifically. And David and I talk so much about how in 30 years of doing this work, we've never seen parents as weary and feel as much like failures as we feel like they do today. Some of that probably comes from comparison. But what would y'all say to encourage weary parents? So both. What do kids need from them and how can we encourage them?
I think what kids need is just like, this is one way to say it, but that safety of knowing that they can show up exactly how they are and still be loved and valuable and special to their parents. And I think to parents, it's like, obviously that is the case, but sometimes I think kids need to be told that, like, hey, you can be yourself, you can mess up, you can be imperfect, you can sin, and we're going to obviously set boundaries and be your parents, but at the same time, we're going to love you no matter what. Because this world with cancel culture and social media and people being so mean on the internet, there's so much like not safe places. You have to be perfect and say the right thing. And if you say something that could be controversial, even on accident, you get roasted, And so being a place where your kids can walk home and take a deep breath as soon as they enter into the house and be like, I'm safe here. Because there's so much unsafe around just emotionally and mentally. And so being a really safe place for that, I think is really needed.
And to piggyback on that, so often it boils down to the words we choose as parents. Our approach to them, of course, but also the words we choose, life-giving words versus life-taking words. And so I think taking a big pause and going, okay, if what my daughter needs from me or what my son needs from me is a safe place and a place where they feel loved no matter what, then how does my vocabulary, what needs to change as it relates to what they're hearing from us? And what are we talking about most often? Because what they're hearing from us most often communicates to them what our priorities are. And if it's always about grades or if always about, school or always about college and where you're going to, if it's always about that, it communicates this is what's most important, and that's not safe. And so I think reevaluating our vocabulary and the way that we talk about things is super important to being that safe landing spot when the whole rest of the world is swirling and feeling uncertain.
That's a great reminder.
And then
I feel convicted by that one.
I do too.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, well, yeah. Speaking to the mirror and that one. But the thing that I would say to weary parents, to your point, is number one, there is only one perfect parent, and we are not him. And we are not always going to get this right. So make a little room in your own, for your own parenting failures, and be quick to approach your kids and humbly apologize, because you're not going to get it right. But there is a way to rebound when we get it wrong. And that is humility and apologizing and having conversations. Because again, our girls need to see that we're real people. We don't have to pretend to know everything. We don't have to pretend to always get it right. We can just be our absolute selves. And then the other thing I would say to encourage them is what you're dealing with at home right now is not necessarily what you're going to have later. So there were seasons of our family life where I thought our kids aren't even going to like each other. I mean, they're much less choose each other and, love each other as adults and want to be together and all of that kind of stuff. So for the parents who are just, you're just blocking and tackling all day, just know this is a season and these years are hard and there's hard stuff, but you can get to the other side of it with relationships intact. So take a deep breath and be encouraged. You might have something else to add to that.
Well, I don't know if this really is a reminder, but you saying that reminds me, I only remember when people would come to my mom and say like, wow, you have your hands full. Like, this is a lot. She would always say, and there's no way you were telling the truth always. She'd always say, I love this season. I love where my kids are at. I love like this specific season of the ages of my kids. I never heard you say it, but I heard you weren't talking to me and you weren't even telling me. You were telling someone else and I was overhearing you say, I love it. Like, I'm doing great. And you weren't lying probably, but there was the positivity of like, no, I love being their mom and communicating that to people in front of us. Because if she was like, hey, I love being your mom, I'm like, yeah, whatever. But hearing her say it to someone else was like, she loves being my mom. Cool. And so what we overhear is really more powerful even than what is said.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we like to end with something fun and food related. And Sandra, we had an opportunity to talk tacos with you and Andy at one point earlier. So we're going to modify this last question. And Allie, we love to ask you, what was one of your favorite meals growing up that your mom prepared? And could we get a recipe for that for the show notes?
Yeah. Do you have any idea what I'm going to say?
I have no idea what you're going to say.
That's fun.
I love breakfast for dinner. So this is not going to be complicated. But you were a big breakfast for dinner mom.
I did love that.
And I thought it was so fun and so cool. And she would make a frittata, right?
Yeah.
That's what it was called.
Yeah.
And it was basically an omelet. I don't know.
Kind of,
It feels
except you
like
don't
an
flip
omelet.
it over. Yeah.
And it was the best. It had bacon in it. And I was like, bacon for dinner. And I loved it.
I do have that recipe. I can send it to you.
Okay.
Would you? We would love it.
Yeah.
That'd be
It was
so
called
fun.
it was called potato bacon frittata. So it's hash browns on the bottom
Ooh.
and then eggs and cheese and turkey bacon because I'm not a big bacon mom.
Not a big
So
bacon
yeah.
one.
Yeah. So we do some turkey bacon on top. Yeah.
That
And
sounds
it
so
was
good.
It sounds amazing.
Oh,
And
I need to make
breakfast for
that again.
dinner
I hadn't thought
always.
about it.
I
I hadn't
know.
thought about it in a long time.
It's
Aw,
really good.
that's
I think
so
about
fun.
it regularly, clearly.
Sounds like you might need to have her over for breakfast.
I know.
I know.
We need to do that.
I know.
Yes. Y'all, thank you. If you are listening and you have a daughter who is a tween or a teenager, please buy this book. Do y'all recommend one copy you pass back and forth or one for each?
I want to say one for each.
You could
but
do it
that
either
doesn't
way.
feel like the right thing to say.
I think the girls would like it better probably if they had their own copy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Because then you can read it at the same time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe so.
Yes.
Maybe
Okay,
so.
that's good. So
But one would
please
work.
buy a copy.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, either way. But please buy 1, 2 copies for your friends. You could read it together, their girls
Yeah.
and you.
That would be
Any-
fun.
That
We
would be
just-
really fun.
Oh, y'all, I'm just so grateful. There's
Yes.
just not enough out there to strengthen this
Mhm.
connection that is so vital. And
Well,
I'm
you're
just
in the
so
trenches,
grateful.
so you know what the needs are, and I'm sure you see that constantly, the both of you. So
Well, we're so grateful it comes from you because
Yes.
we trust you so much
Yes,
and are
we
just
do.
so grateful for your voices in the world.
well, thank you, and
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for having us. Y'all
This
are
is
just
so
the
fun.
best.
Thanks for
delight.
doing this with us.
Mhm. David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible.
Amanda Young, our operations manager,
Chris Starrett, our engineer and producer,
our management team at KCH.
and we are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.